Today you will learn how the types of fat affect baking with a very basic experiment using sugar cookies. You can follow along by following the recipe in the link below. It is a very simple recipe and it's non-forgiving, so when you use fat, it's going to show which one tastes the best. We'll go over shortening, butter, margarine, vegetable spread, and then oil. When it comes to baking, shortening is one of my favorite things to work with. It gives you the most tender, flaky pie crust you can imagine. Cookies will just melt away in your mouth and you'll get cakes that are just absolutely beautiful. Most shortenings have a 100% fat ratio. Then there is butter. Butter is the gold standard of baking. Everybody insists you have to have butter in this recipe, and that's what we are going to find out today. Are there suitable substitutes for butter, or do you have to always use butter? Margarine is just like butter. Both margarine and butter have 80% fat content. So to be considered margarine, it has to have at least 80% fat or more. Margarine is cheaper than butter and it's also got a lot of dairy-free options. Vegetable spread is similar to margarine in the fact that it is a spread. However, it has less than 80% fat content. That means it can have anywhere from 0 to 79% fat content, and it will be either a hit or miss when it comes to baking. Oil is very similar to shortening when it comes to baking. You will have a higher percentage of fat, which will make things very tender, very flaky, but when it comes to things like cookies, you may have a puffier cookie than a flat cookie. So let's do an experiment with all these types of fat. We're going to make some sugar cookies. We're going to bake on this tray. We're going to use it at 375 or 190 C. We're going to use a cookie scoop for uniform cookies and try to put 9 to a tray. It should look like this theoretically. And then we're going to move it to a cooling rack. Let's look at each of the batters. This is the butter before we add in the flour. It is very creamy, light, and fluffy. And here is the shortening one, also very creamy, light, and fluffy. And then we have the margarine one, looks pretty similar. Next up, we're going to show you the vegetable one. I will show you that the vegetable spread is wanting to split a little bit, so you'll want to make sure that you mix this carefully. And finally, the oil. It is a very fluid batter. And here we are several hours later and we have tons of cookies to look at. Can you tell which one is which? Which fat is used on which plate? Let's look at each of them individually and see if you can give an idea which one it is. Here is the first plate. It's a very nice light golden brown. When you open it up, it's nice and soft and chewy, and it looks really nice. And apparently even the dogs think so. I didn't even know they were in the background. That's hilarious. Next is another type. It's a nicer golden brown. It's a little tougher on the top, but when you crack into it, it's nice and soft and chewy as well. Then here is one that didn't spread as much, but it does feel okay. But when you pull it apart, it's a little more crumbly than the other, and there seems to be air pockets. This one's actually really nice. It's kind of the best of both worlds. It's got a nice short crumb, but it still feels really nice and soft and tender. And then there's this one. It's also a little bit puffy. It's got a golden color to it, but it seems kind of dry and a little bit wet at the same time. I'm not sure if it's going to taste good. And it also wants to apparently fall off the plate. As you can see, there's some slight variations among them. Some are spread out a little bit more, some are very puffy, and this one has a nice crinkly top. Can you tell which one is which just by looking at the plate? Each one of them tasted very good. Some were just slightly better than the others. The first one was the butter sugar cookie. It was absolutely wonderful to eat. Surprisingly, so was the margarine one. You really couldn't tell much of a difference between the two, except for that the butter one has a slightly chewier texture. The oil one was very good to taste, but the texture was puffier than what you're used to. Same with the vegetable spread one. It was just slightly puffier. It actually had a taste of more like a shortbread. And then shortening one was my favorite personally. It had the best of both worlds. Looking at all these cookies, which one do you think you would like to try? How about all of them? I do encourage you to experiment in the kitchen. Try out different fats, try out different flavors. See how it works. Expect failures, expect successes. This is how you learn. Visit us at jacksonsjob.com for more recipes, and as always, happy baking.